Well, welcome everyone. Today is June 17th, 2024, and my name is Tiffany Scroggs. I'm joined today by Lisa Lagerstrom with the Washington APEX Accelerator program, and we are going to be exploring the electric vehicle supply equipment contract. This is a statewide contract that is up for bid right now. We're going to dive into it a little bit, hopefully get you oriented to the solicitation to make you as efficient as possible when you're exploring whether or not to bid, and what questions you have for the contract specialist. So this is called a preparing to bid session. It really is designed to help you orient around the solicitation. Hopefully you've all received a copy of these slides, as well as a couple of documents that we're going to be using in an interactive way today. So feel free to open up the actual solicitation if you can do that. Feel free to open up the bid, no bid decision matrix, which was emailed to you, as well as one other Word document, which is the checklist. So, but let's go ahead and get into a little bit of the history of this solicitation, a little bit of information as to the backstory to hopefully get you oriented and understanding the landscape for this particular solicitation. So I've cut and pasted some language there from the solicitation to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about today. The electric vehicle supply equipment is EVSE. That's a new acronym for me, not being in this space. And it's to purchase certain specified power supply devices. It is not for the install. So if your company specializes in the installation of such devices, this contract is not something that you would want to bid on directly, but maybe it's of interest because you want to see what the state wants to install. So let's get moving here. So we'll talk a little bit about the APEX Accelerator and who we are and why we're here today. We'll go into the solicitation history. We'll review the actual opportunity that's out now, and we'll provide you with the pre-bid checklist, as well as a bid or no bid decision matrix. These are your tools, so you can rename them, you can add your logo to them, you can change the font, you can add content as you see fit. There's a purpose to why we provided them in Word. We want you to make them your own. And then we'll end the session within the hour, talking about upcoming other resource providers, including the APEX Accelerator, but others as well, that can help you with your next steps. So the APEX Accelerator is a not-for-profit organization. We're at the Thurston Economic Development Council, and we have other locations around the state as well. We are funded in part by the United States government to help businesses navigate government contracts and subcontracts. We provide no-cost advising, and we've been doing it for over 30 years. We're supported locally by Washington State, by Green River College and other economic development organizations, and we want to see you succeed. We want to see specifically Washington State businesses bidding on government contracts and winning and being profitable long-term in the marketplace. If you're not from Washington State, that's okay. We do have other APEX accelerators across the state who would be delighted to work with you, across the country, excuse me, who would be, that you would work with, and we can provide the links so you can find your local APEX accelerator. This is our map of Washington. If you are in Washington State, you would start out with your local advisor, and then they might pull in other subject matters experts across the state, but you start out with your local person and get to know them, and they get to know your business, and they advise you from there. So a little bit on the solicitation history. I don't want to spend too much time talking about who we are and what we do. I want to dive in to the solicitation history. So Washington State Department of Enterprise Services is a state agency that manages statewide contracts. They used to be called master contracts, and they have over 1,500 businesses on these contracts known as vendors. And the annual spend is close to $2 billion. So quite a lot of spend goes through these statewide contracts. It's typically goods and services that the state and local governments need on a regular basis. So every time they buy a pencil, they don't have to do a competitive procurement. They can just go to the pre-negotiated statewide contract for office supplies and pick from a vendor, a business that's already on that contract, and away they go. The state agencies are mandated to use the statewide contract unless they can justify not doing it. Like, well, what I buy isn't on statewide contract is a justification there. As well as local governments use it too. The local governments are not required to use statewide contracts, but they certainly do from time to time. This electric vehicle supply equipment is not a new contract for Washington State, which gives us some really good market research and pricing data that I want to share with you today. Before we dive too far into that, I want to help answer the question of how do agencies get this equipment now? This is a great place to start because public procurement is public. We can find out who's buying what from who and how much. You just usually have to know where to look. And, the state and local governments, they're all decentralized a lot of the time. And sometimes it's kind of hard to sleuth out this information. But Washington State Department of Enterprise Services does collect statewide contract data that we can pull, and we have pulled into a nice little pivot chart for you, and I can show you the spend. And so the DES statewide contract that they're refreshing or renewing is 04016. The other places that you can, if you're a state buyer, where you can go to get electric vehicle supply equipment is 2 NASPO contracts. So NASPO is an acronym for a cooperative contract that's nationwide. And so I believe one of these is based in Oregon, but that just means that they're in charge of the procurement. Any state government across the country can kind of tack on to these NASPO contracts. And there's one for automotive parts and one for facility maintenance, repair and operations, and industrial supplies. That's all lumped into one NASPO contract. That one's currently in the evaluation phase, but you could go onto these contract links and find one of the vendors and take a look at their parts to see if what it is you sell is already being sold through the NASPO contract. To give you a sense of the competitive analysis. And why I bring up these 3 links is so pretend I am in Department of Corrections and I manage a fleet of vehicles and 2 of them are electric and our charger went out. I don't even know if this is a real likely scenario, and now I need a new charger, right? And I know the statewide has a contract for electric vehicle supply equipment. So I might check there, but I might also check these 2 NASPO contracts, check pricing and do some comps because I want the cheapest probably part for my needs. And so it might also be that I have a particular need or a unique situation, and that's only available on one of these contracts and not on another. So anyway, I just want to point out that buyers within state and local governments have options as to where they get their supplies and equipment, and you want to be on the receiving end of those. So the more contracts you can get on where you think your customers might be looking for you, the better. So let's take a closer look at the current contract for electric vehicle supply and equipment. This is the one that they're replacing. And you can go to this link here in the slide deck and view it yourself. There's 3 categories there and notice the category 3 includes the installation. So that's how it works now. The solicitation history for this existing one is top vendors by spend. So I pulled this from data.wa.gov and I pulled a giant Excel file and then I created a little pivot chart of this spend for this particular contract. And there's 5 vendors on the current contract and 3 of them are getting work. So this answers one of the questions that Lisa and I get a lot at APEX Accelerator is if I'm on a statewide contract, am I guaranteed work? So what do you think the answer is based on this data chart that you see now? And feel free to unmute and shout out. It's kind of lonely hearing me talking to my little picture here. Does anyone want to guess what the answer is? If you're on statewide contract, are you guaranteed work?
No.
Thanks, Kelly. Answer is no. But guess what? Broadband and FreeWire, they still have to report quarterly that they don't have any spend. And so that can be kind of cumbersome over the years as they have to report every single quarter that they don't have any spend. Anyway, look forward to that. Quarterly reporting. So also in this solicitation, you can see the solicitation history, and you can look at the vendor by county pricing and contact info. And so from there, you can pull up the vendors and see their pricing. And it's very detailed. This is what the agencies use to go shopping. You can compare your pricing to what agencies are accustomed to. So we already looked at kind of who was winning contracts on the current contract. This is by year. I wanted to just show that it's really spiked up, and that the 2.5 million estimate that's in the solicitation that you might have read is based on the 2023 data. In 2023, the usage on this contract was 2.4 million. What's unclear to me is if it was in the install or if it was just the equipment. We don't know. So just keep that in mind. The scope of this contract is slightly smaller. Well, it might not be slightly, it might be a lot smaller. I don't know. Okay. These are the top agencies that are using the existing contract. And it's from 2028 to 23, like the summary spend. And I cut off folks that weren't buying it over 20 grand. But City of Bellingham looks like they did quite a bit of electric vehicles. So if you have an electric vehicle, I think Bellingham might be a good city to go visit. The Department of Enterprise Services was the second biggest user. And then Pierce Transit, City of Seattle, Labor and Industry. So you can see a good mix of state agencies as well as local governments using this contract. You can also suspect that when Department of Enterprise Services decides which statewide contracts they want to work on, they look at the total spend and they talk to their customers, which are going to be the agencies. So I suspect that Department of Enterprise Services had a stakeholder meeting where they called in the City of Bellingham and Pierce Transit and City of Seattle and Labor and Industries. And they said, hey, tell me a little bit about your electric vehicle supply needs and what you want to see in the next contract. And so all of that due diligence led up to where we're at today, which is an actual solicitation posted on the website. There's other places you can see historical spend. I just throw this out there in case the data set I pulled wasn't sufficient. You can look up your competitors on Open Checkbook. This is essentially a checkbook. It literally, you can type in the name of a business and it will tell you how many checks the state has sent to them and the dollar value of such checks per month. That's it. That's really not super useful, other than maybe you could tell volume. And then follow that up with a public records request that helps understand a little bit more about what the agency is buying from who. You could also do a WEBS report inside WEBS, and we'll talk about WEBS in a second. You can pull a report feature for award notices and take a look that way. And then the fourth bullet there is Lisa and I at the APEX Accelerator, we have access to a subscription called GovSpend, and we can show you how that works and kind of do some sample searches with you to uncover who's buying what from who and how much. And this is up-to-date information most of the time. It usually relies on public records requests for some of the other agencies that aren't quite as transparent. So there might be a lag there, but pretty powerful database. If you want to contact your APEX Accelerator advisor and play around with that. So let's talk about the current opportunity. That was all kind of historical opportunity, information on the old contract that's still alive, but this is the new opportunity, and it's on WEBS. WEBS is called the Washington Electronic Business Solutions. When you're in WEBS, registering in WEBS is free. If you're not yet registered in WEBS, that is your homework for today. Between now and 5 p.m., get registered in WEBS, because WEBS is the only authoritative source. And if somebody else at DES or even the contracting officer sometimes will say things verbally, but if it's not in WEBS and if it's not written down in WEBS, then it may not be considered the correct information. So don't rely on what I say or what Lisa says or what you hear Googling. It's going to be WEBS. And so this is where the solicitation will be posted. The question and answers will be posted. Any amendments, which there already are some, are going to be posted. So you have to be in WEBS. to be able to get that information and to be awarded the contract. The other thing in WEBS, you want to check your commodity codes. So when you registered in WEBS, you went through the extremely tedious process of checking commodity codes that were relevant to what your firm provides. If you did that 5 years ago and you were only on your first cup of coffee of the day, you might have missed some. So you want to hop in there and make sure that the commodity codes listed here match what's in your are included in your WEBS profile. So it's pretty easy fix. You can hop in there and click manage my commodity codes right there on the top, and you can add all of these to it. You also want to make sure you're getting email notifications. So the system, the contract specialist is going to hop into WEBS and email information to the businesses that are registered under those commodity codes. And if you're not getting those emails, then something's not quite right. Maybe your email server is blocking them and sending them to your spam folder. Maybe your email is out of date. Maybe your WEBS registration is out of date, but you want to make sure that you are getting emails from the system. You can also scroll down on that current opportunity and see the vendors that have downloaded it. And you can see that I downloaded it. I'm the first person on there. I guess it's in alphabetical order. So APEX Accelerator was the very first listing there with our training email that goes straight to Lisa. And we have the status of us as a small business. And so you want to make sure that if you did download it, that you're listed as correct. And regardless of whether or not you see yourself as downloading it, you also want to go to your profile and make sure you're listed as a small business. I think that's my next slide. Yeah. So check your profile, make sure it's all up to date and beautiful. And if you are certified by the Office of Minority Women Business Enterprises or the Veteran-Owned Business designation, you want to make sure that it's listed accurately on your profile. So this is like a screenshot of my profile, has my name and email, has my when I registered back in 2011. And then it has down there that I am a Washington small business. And that's really important for this type of procurement because, as we'll discover in a minute, there's some good competitive advantages for being a Washington small or a veteran-owned business. The last thing I want to mention about WEBS is to download all the attachments. And so this can get really cumbersome really quickly. So you want to make sure you have a filing plan for all of these. Some people like to just print them all off. I prefer to create a folder and relabel everything the same as it's labeled in WEBS with the date that I downloaded it. And the reason the date's important is that you can already see on here that the solicitation amendments have been posted. So then when I go download my amendment, I know that that's the most current one because it has the date that I downloaded it. That's just a nice little tip there because the exhibits can get pretty cumbersome pretty quickly. And this one has exhibits A through G, as well as the actual solicitation itself, plus the amendment. So already we're getting pretty complex with our data tracking and our information storage. You know, we always tell you to read and understand what you're looking at, which can be, it's not going to read like a romance novel. It's going to read like an attorney put it together. And you might have to hop around quite a bit. So if you can stay electronic, Control F is your best friend when you're reviewing some of these documents because you can hit Control F on your machine and then type in a word and it will auto-populate however many times that word shows up. So I used it several times in the creation of this PowerPoint because I didn't read it top to bottom, which is not something you do from the very beginning. What I'm going to recommend that you do at the very beginning is kind of skim it for the most important information that will populate your checklist. So let's dive in. Let's do that together. So the pre-bid checklist is kind of, I want to show you where we're at in the whole scheme of things, is in the reading the solicitation document phase. We're trying to pull out information so that we can make a bid, no bid decision. So we would recommend that you kind of read the solicitation documents, you fill out your checklist, and then you make a bid or no bid decision. Then you can organize your approach, assemble the bid, and submit on time. So we're in the early phase of our process for winning this solicitation. So in your email from Lisa is the pre-bid checklist. If I could ask everyone to go ahead and pull that up, you can minimize my pretty face and pull up the Word document that has kind of these checklist items that you can make your own. We're going to go through it together. So you're going to need a copy of the solicitation. So if you have a copy of the solicitation out, I need your help to tell me this first line here, the solicitation review check sheet for solicitation number what? What number of solicitation are we on? Can anyone help me by unmuting and telling me?
Okay, Tiffany. Oh, there, somebody put it in chat. 23123.
Yay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I cannot see the chat. So
I'll shout out.
yeah, shout it out. Okay, perfect. So 23123, which I typed incorrectly like 6 times today. That's a lot of 1s and 2s and 3s. All right, when's the deadline to submit? Has anyone found that yet? It's always the first thing I look at. How much time do I have to contact all the people I need to contact in order to get this thing across the finish line?
July 22nd.
Boom, July 22nd.
Nice.
And whoever typed that in, thank you. It was found in the solicitation document, page 6. So if you want to follow along, you can skim forward to page 6 and see a lot of these dates, including the pre-proposal conference date, which happens to be tomorrow at 10:30. I don't, well, I guess I should double check. It's not mandatory. It's usually not mandatory to come to that, but it's really helpful.
Very.
You can kind of meet the contract specialist. You can hear straight from their mouth kind of what they're looking for, and you can ask questions. Note that all the questions you ask tomorrow at the pre-bid conference will be kind of gathered into a Word document. Sometimes they even have you type it up for them. And then they provide written answers and they publish that on webs. So within the next few days after pre-proposal conference, you can expect another amendment and you'll be notified by email when that pops on there, if you're getting the emails, with the Q&A. And then if there's a site visit, which again, this checklist is for all procurements, so it's really generic. If what you sell is supplies, you probably never have a site visit, I'm guessing, maybe you do. But for this particular solicitation, you don't. So you might want to even remove that line item from your pre-proposal checklist. There is a pre-proposal inquiry cutoff date. We have a former federal contract officer on our team who calls it a PPI. And I thought, what's that? Oh, you mean the Q&A period. So anyway, the Q&A period ends July 22nd. So they're taking questions up until the very last minute. And which is odd to me. And please double check me if I'm wrong on that date, because that means the contract specialist doesn't have much time to turn around an answer for you to be able to take that answer into consideration for your bid. Normally they cut off Q&A about a week prior to the deadline. But
that might be a good question for tomorrow.
Yeah, is, you know, if I
pre-bid.
submit a question on July 21st, if I submit a question on July 21st, will you be able to respond in time for me to incorporate that in my bid?
Yeah.
That's a very valid question. And a lot of times what we see is the questions are so good that the contract specialist actually has to amend the solicitation. For example, a couple solicitations ago, I asked, you know, hey, I don't see Exhibit B. It was missing. And they had to amend the solicitation to add the Exhibit B. And it was early enough in the process, they didn't need to extend the deadline. But had we waited a few weeks to ask that question and be like, where's Exhibit B? They would have had to extend the deadline. So just keep an eye out for that. And make sure you're not submitting your bid too early, because there might be amendments or Q&A that won't make you want to change some of your responses. The issue date of the solicitation was June 7th. So it's been out on webs for a good 10 days. Which is why there's such a robust downloading list, I think. Sometimes, you know, people wait a few days to download, but there's a nice long list of firms that already have a game plan in place, already moving forward with this solicitation. So this next section, I want to talk a little bit about what the state calls reserved awards. In the federal space, they're usually called set-asides, or they could be considered preferences, although that's somewhat of a loaded term these days, for veteran-owned or small business. So this information is going to be found on page 3 of the solicitation document. And there are these reserved awards for Washington small or veteran-owned. But there's a little caveat in this one related to pricing, saying it's not just the next best small business, it's the next best small business whose pricing is within a range of the best highest scoring firm, which is actually somewhat new for DES to add that component on there. So makes sense, but just keep in mind, read that information. The method of proposal submission. A lot of firms that are used to e-procurement systems with other government agencies may find it surprising that WEBS does not accept your solicitation response. You have to email that to the contract specialist. And I say have to, but actually that's very simple. You just email it over and make sure it's not zipped. Make sure that the subject line is exactly as it specifies on page 16. So I don't know if she can kick out your bid if the subject line doesn't follow the instructions, but just make sure you're following the instructions. Type of solicitation. So this is where it's important to pull out how you're going to be scored. And when you go to make a bid or no bid decision, like we're going to use next, we want to know if we can be competitive. So how are you going to be scored on this sucker? The non-cost factors are actually 58% of the solicitation, which is somewhat unusual for a supply equipment contract. A lot of supply and equipment contracts are low bid. Who has the cheapest pencils in the world? They get to be on contract selling their pencils to the state. So anyway, 1,200 points is non-cost factors, and you can find those on page 10 and Exhibit B. And then 39% of the points is going to be based on price or your cost that you put forth. And then you get 50 points related to workers' rights, Executive Order 1803. So I think that adds up to 100 points right there, pretty close. Note that this type of contract is fixed and firm, the pricing is, for at least 1 year. And then there's an automatic economic adjustment tied to an index. So a lot of times businesses are really excited to get on contract and they don't realize that inflation is a thing. And if they didn't have an economic adjustment in their contract, it was a really sad day for them. And we had a lot of that over the last 3 years. And so the state is actually, I think, doing a best practice, which is tying it to an index, and they give you the index in the solicitation. So if it could go down or it could go up, but either way, you can help prepare your firm for the index adjustment every year. And where did I find that information? I wasn't in the solicitation. So if you're frantically trying to do Control F on the solicitation for economic adjustment or price escalation clause, you're not going to find it in there. I had to go to the Exhibit D, the Cooperative Purchasing Agreement or the sample contract. And this is a really important exhibit. If you choose to bid, you want to make sure that you understand all the clauses in there, because that's what you're going to be held to. One of the most important clauses is going to be most favored customer clause. That's also in Exhibit D. And that'll kind of dictate that, hey, if you're on this statewide contract at the pricing you gave us, that means you can't sell to another state agency at a lower amount or another customer at a lower amount. Most favored customer clause. So you want to make sure that you and your attorney read that one together closely. All right. So that's the checklist. I, of course, didn't go through all the line items. That's for you to do on your own. And the idea is that you pull out the really important information that will help you make a bid or no bid decision. It's really easy to hear the title and the description of a solicitation and decide you're going to bid, but we want you to kind of think about it and make sure that you have all the information you need and you've done some sort of analysis that's non-emotional, that's scored, for your firm. And at my organization, I do this for my bosses, right? Before I bid on a new contract or grant, I make sure that we've done a bid or no bid analysis. And then that's what I present to my leadership. You might be in a position where it's just you and you're the dog, but regardless, it's a really important exercise to walk through. So a bid or no bid analysis is based on your company's goals, your proficiencies, and your likelihood for success. It forces you to slow down and read the solicitation and pull out those essential pieces, because you, small businesses and even large businesses, you do not have the luxury of wasting time. Time is one of your top commodities, so don't waste time bidding on something you don't want or can't win. It also allows you space to think about why you want this work and how you'll bid it competitively. So our bid or no bid checklist is in your email inbox, and it is just one of many ways to do this. We work with a lot of businesses and we see all sorts of different ways to do it. But every analysis has two main components. One is, can we bid? And the questions underneath can we bid might include, can you meet the technical requirements? Can you meet the schedule? Do you understand the risks of the solicitation? And do you have the experience requirements? That 1,200 points for non-cost factors, what's included in that? So that would require you to open up Exhibit B and really understand whether or not you can bid and meet all of those requirements. So you want to ask yourself these questions and rank yourself from 5 to 1. 5 being, yeah, I do this all day, every day. I've done it for 60 years. Great. Give yourself a 5. If you're like, oh, this is kind of a side gig, a side hustle for our firm, we don't necessarily always do this. We don't know if we can even meet some of the specs, then it's a 2 or a 1. And then you got to get to work trying to fill the requirements. But anyway, you total up your score for can we bid, and you move on to do we want to bid? So is this program or is this solicitation opportunity part of our core business? Is it what we want to do? When you take a look at all of your revenue sources for your business now, is the supply and equipment side of electric vehicles something that you want to continue in? Is it profitable for you? Is there additional work? Yeah, I would say the stay-away contracts have an opportunity for a pretty significant body of work, because like I said, the state agencies are mandated to use the stay-away contracts to buy this particular supply, and the local governments can hop on there and buy it. And a lot of them do, rather than going through some other procurement method. Let's see. So you can kind of see whether or not you want to bid based on some of these questions. And some of it might be that the past performance is just too steep. Maybe in services, a lot of times the insurance requirements are too steep. And so, kind of pull out the important pieces of the solicitation and help yourself answer these questions. And when you're done, you get a little score for yourself, and you can kind of assess like, okay, we have some gaps we need to fill. I really want to go after it because of X, Y, and Z. And then you have a plan. So, you've on this chart here, you've read the solicitation documents, you've honed in on the solicitation and Exhibit B, like I've mentioned before, and you've decided to bid or not based on what your matrix is saying. And now it's time to organize your approach, and know that the APEX Accelerator program can meet with you at any phase in this journey, from today when you're maybe first reading it for the first time, or when you're actively bidding and you want a fresh set of eyes on your proposal. We'd be happy to take a look at it and critique it. A lot of our team members are former entrepreneurs that sold to government, or they're former contracting officers, and they can look at it through a different lens than maybe you as the business owner. We can also help you after award if you wanted to put together a marketing strategy, regardless of whether or not you won. If you're still selling in this space to government agencies, you need a marketing strategy, and we can help you with that. So your APEX Accelerator advisor can be contacted if you're in Washington State at that email address there, info@washingtonapex.org, or you can go to our website and click Become a Client. And if you're not in Washington, you would want to go to napex-us to find your local APEX Accelerator across the country. So a few top tips before we open it up to questions. And I know that you're just chomping at the bit to ask me questions, so get those ready. But my 4 top tips for you is to ask questions and identify barriers to participation now. So in state procurement, it's really unlikely to protest a solicitation if you didn't have a complaint prior to the protest. So we want the procurements to be really clear. We want them to be fair and reasonable and have you understanding what you're bidding on. So if anything is unclear, that does not give you a competitive advantage. If anything, it makes it harder for you to participate because it's based more on who's lucky enough to interpret it correctly. So if there's something you don't understand, ask now. If there's a barrier to your participation, let Department of Enterprise Services know that now. So that maybe they didn't realize that they've put up a barrier to you participating. They want a lot of bidders on this, and they want a lot of small and veteran-owned bidders on this. A debrief is a meeting with the contract specialist after the apparent successful bidder has been notified that can walk you through kind of how you were scored. And so you have to request that within 3 days of being notified whether or not you were an apparent successful bidder. And we highly recommend you get one of those debriefs, regardless of whether or not you won. If you didn't win, you can potentially, there's other things you can do. You can see if any of those folks on the contract need subcontractors, probably not in the supply arena, but maybe. You could also target agencies who aren't mandated to use the statewide contract, or perhaps you have other products that could be sold through other avenues. So still meet with your APEX Accelerator and brainstorm that. The last tip there is to double check that you're a Washington State small business. And if you're eligible, register or certify as a veteran-owned business. And I've given you the link there that's in your PowerPoint that you can go directly to the Department of Veteran Affairs to go get certified. It is the easiest, fastest certification on the planet. They just check your DD-214 and that you are who you say you are, and boom, you're in. So Shamika does a fantastic job over there at Washington State Department of VA. There is additional assistance. The APEX accelerators are here for you, but also the Department of Enterprise Services has their own procurement, inclusion, and equity program. You can email them there. There's 4 or 5 of them now who provide support to businesses trying to navigate state procurement. They might kick you back to APEX, but they also might refer you to Next Consulting and Song Consulting, who are 2 consultants. They're for-profit consultants who are being hired by DES to provide no-cost technical assistance to you bidding on state procurement. So use your resources. Make sure that they're, if you need help, that you're getting the help, because there's plenty of help out there for you. This is our email. Lisa and Tiffany here with our website where you can find your program in your home state. You can also link to join our newsletter where you can find out about other opportunities for training or for advising. We have fun articles in there, that kind of thing. So thank you so much for coming. We'll go ahead and hang on. Why don't we stop recording there, Lisa, and we'll see if anyone else